So, what exactly are the top 5 roles to be done as an innovation leader? Hi, this is Clay Richardson, Chief Accelerator with Digital Fast Forward and your innovation leadership coach. And I recently finished reading a book called CEO Excellence, and it got me thinking more and more about some of the conversations that I've been having with different innovation leaders that I work with. And one of the things I hear from innovation leaders is just this drive to be more effective and get to more consistent outcomes in the role. And this is, if I look at, innovation leaders, whether they're, wearing the hat of enterprise architect, CTO, some might be business analysts, business architects. So it's a range of different titles. But ultimately, these people in these titles wear the hat of being responsible for driving innovation in their organizations. And as I'm working with them, I hear more and more this struggle around how do I become more effective as an innovation leader? And the belief they have is that being effective ultimately is about how do I educate more and more stakeholders, more and more other executives in the company around how to drive innovation and how to use design thinking. And that makes sense, right? If you think about innovation, a lot of times, if you're in that role, your job is to empower others and help them lead innovation, right? But I want to challenge you, if you're in that role of an innovation leader, is to really think about it. Is your role just to educate people? Is the role of innovation leadership just about educating people and others? That's important. But my question is whether, and the challenge I want to give to you is whether the role is ultimately about leading innovation and being a co-innovation partner to make sure that the big ideas in the company lead to big outcomes and having ownership over that, right? It doesn't mean you own it always 100%, but it definitely means more than educating stakeholders or educating other leaders on how to drive innovation. It's a much more, if you can allow me, it's more of a sleeves rolled up role, right? We can't be on the sidelines, and the most effective innovators that I see are actually in the trenches driving the innovation. They're not leaving it to someone else. They're partnering, they're co-innovating, right? That's why I love this term and the whole concept of co-innovation, because it's really about you as an innovation leader partnering very closely with the stakeholders in your organization to actually co-own getting to those outcomes. And this is critical. And so that's the challenge I'm giving to you. And one of the things I thought about, when it comes to this, how can innovation leaders become more effective? This is what I loved about this book, CEO Excellence, is it actually broke down what are the jobs to be done as a CEO. And then it looked at, for the top CEOs in the world, what does it mean to drive to results and outcomes in an excellent way, right? And sometimes we look at words, like I'm one of these people that I look at the word excellence and I hate the word, right? Because it's almost like perfection, right? And I think when I read this book, it actually got me out of thinking about excellence as perfection, but more about continuous practice around mastery of key capabilities, right? It's around continuous mastery of key jobs to be done, right? And it got me thinking too about, so what are the top jobs to be done that you and me, I'm an innovation leader. I drive innovation in my company, partner with other leaders outside of Digital Fast Forward to drive innovation. And so the question that I started asking and looking at is, what are the top 5 jobs to be done that we have to get done as innovation leaders? right? And you may be familiar with the term. If you're an innovation leader, I'm sure you know where the term jobs to be done comes from. And it's from Clayton Christensen, who wrote Innovator's Dilemma and a bunch of other innovation books. And really, jobs to be done is really about looking at what are the key goals and outcomes that a customer is trying to get to, right? And so what we're looking at with jobs to be done is kind of reflecting it back on our role, right, as innovation leaders. What are the top 5 jobs to be done? And this is an area I want to go deeper and deeper into in terms of really helping leaders get crystal clear on what they have to do well in order to get to the outcomes in a consistent way when it comes to innovation. And so when I stepped back and looked at, we've worked with hundreds of leaders over hundreds of projects, innovation projects. Over my career, worked with thousands of leaders over, I would guess, I was trying to do the math, but if I take into account all the way from, early 2000s, when I first stepped into this role to, today, going through my time at Forrester, also Forrester Research, easily thousands of leaders that I've worked with, thousands of projects that I've delivered or been involved with. And I tried to look back across all of those and say, what are the top 5 jobs to be done that are most critical for innovation leaders? And I want to walk you through these. And like I said, when I came up with these, when I looked at them, I realized each one of these deserves its own episode, right? And so we're going to drill down deep into each one of these as we go through this journey together. And so I'm going to start and walk through each one, give you high level, and then I'd love to hear from you. Like, are there other jobs to be done that we left out? So number 1 job to be done as an innovation leader is driving alignment, right? Innovation is one of these things where everybody has a different idea. Everybody has a different direction that they think innovation or an idea should go in, right? And your job as a number 1 job to be done as an innovation leader is to get people aligned, right? A lot of times it's not about getting alignment around the idea, right? Because everybody's going to have a different idea. Getting people aligned around what's the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And that's such a critical job to be done, but also a critical skill set, a critical capability that you have to build is driving stakeholder alignment. Sometimes, depending on what level you're at in an organization, you have to drive alignment at the board level, right? And so it's not just, hey, I got to work with my CEO, or if you're a CEO, CIO, I got to work with, my team. A lot of times as an innovation leader, if you're trying to drive new innovation or trying to drive digital transformation, you have to be able to align the stakeholders around the problem that needs to be solved, right? What is it that we're trying to address? What is it that we're trying to solve? So that's number 1, alignment around the problem to be solved, alignment around key ideas and key themes. The second job to be done that's essential is research. You have to be able to do really good user research, and you have to be able to navigate and consume research, right? And I'm not just saying this because I'm a former researcher at Forrester Research, but I'm saying this from the standpoint of the best innovators are always taking in new information, taking in new perspectives, but not just from a single source, right? It's not just about, hey, I read the latest research report, or I read the latest Harvard Business Review, right? It's also getting out in the field and doing user research, actually understanding your customer and understanding your customer's customer sometimes. And so that research piece, I have it as number 2. Some people may put it higher up, but it's so critical to have research as a key capability, critical job to be done. The third most important job to be done in the top 5 list is you have to be able to facilitate, right? And when I say facilitate, some people confuse facilitate with educate, right? And facilitation is not about training. Facilitation, like even in this conversation, is really about a multi-dimensional conversation across different stakeholders and being able to help drive that. But also, and this is the tricky part, and like I said, we'll go deeper into this. The tricky part is you still have to have a point of view, right? Facilitators, in my mind, right, in my own experience, just as a facilitator, but also looking at some of the greatest facilitators that I've seen, always have a point of view, but they make sure that they're bringing so many voices in. And this is essential, especially as an innovation leader, because if you're going to be successful as an innovation leader, like I talked about before, it's about co-innovation. So you're partnering with the stakeholders, but you have to come with a point of view. And this is something I learned in my time as a research analyst and working with clients, is always when we would work helping clients drive strategy, even though I had to remain independent, I always had to come with a point of view. I couldn't just sit there and say, well, what do you think? What do you think, right? It's funny, I just remember, I probably shared this story before. I just remember my first time when I was at Forrester Research, and I, did my first strategy day with a client, and I did it with one of my mentors, who brought me into Forrester. And, it was my first time. I normally, would be in these sort of meetings as a consultant, and really, as a consultant, it's very different, right? You're really listening to the client and saying, okay, let me figure out how I can really help them. Whereas, my mentor, she kind of called me out because she said, look, you're no longer a consultant. You're a researcher now. You're an analyst. Your job is to make the call, right? And that's what we have to have as innovation leaders. You have to make the call. Doesn't mean that you have to beat people over their heads, but you have to come with a point of view, but be willing to work and facilitate the conversation, right? That's the important. It's a tricky, when we talk about facilitation in the context of innovation leadership, it's not traditional facilitation. It's actually a little bit of that analyst hat where you're making the call and you have a point of view, but you're also looking to get alignment around stakeholders, right? And making sure everybody's voice is heard along with your voice, right? And this one, I think I could write a whole book. I could write a whole book on just great facilitation, right? What does that look like? How do you show up? How do you prepare, right? And I actually was working with a client recently to help prepare for a big facilitated session. And, one of my tricks with facilitation is don't over prepare. Because if you over prepare, what happens, and I see a lot of facilitators make this mistake, is they over prepare, and what ends up happening is they're so scripted, they don't create space for the dialogue. They don't create space to allow people, or allow space, I should say, that gives people that opportunity to say, aha, or put their fingerprint on it, or pull things out, right? And so that's one of the things I try not to do. Always have an agenda, but I'm also okay to go off script with the agenda, right? Probably the only other thing I'll mention here on facilitate, and we'll go deeper into this in a separate episode, but the only other thing I try to do with facilitation is make sure there's an outcome statement for whatever activity you're facilitating. And that keeps people looking at the North Star. What is the outcome we're trying to get to for this session? We get agreement on that. That creates so much white space to really go off script, to let people say things, let people kind of find their way, but it also opens you up to be an observer while facilitating it. So that's really critical. The fourth job to be done that's critical is prioritize, right? Prioritizing the ideas. And this is so essential, right? Is with prioritization, it's about working with stakeholders to really begin to narrow in or zero in on what are the top 3 ideas or solutions we want to start working through, right? And you have to be able to build a framework for this. And when we do this, as part of leadership coaching or just our advice to innovation leaders is make sure you have a framework that allows you to prioritize in a way that everybody's gonna be able to share their voice, but also agree with, right? And so a lot of times you'll see 2x2s or a matrix or, I know in my process days, we would even do something along the lines of, what are the prioritization criteria? So we may have, 10, 12 criteria that help us look at how do we prioritize? And this seems like a very straightforward activity, but this can also be an activity that trips teams up. It's a job to be done that you have to get good at, right? And it's not a force fitting and just driving people towards a specific idea. It's actually co-creating, right? Actually, sometimes bringing 2 or 3 ideas together to try to drive forward, but also acknowledging, and this is essential, this is a pro tip. It's also acknowledging that the key to innovation is about build to learn. It's not about one idea being the best idea and that's the end all and be all. If you really believe that, you're not an innovation leader. I'll just say it, call it out. If you believe that one idea is going to be the idea that saves the world and is the silver bullet, that's the whole, besides the whole point. The whole idea of being an innovation leader and these jobs to be done is learning. Is we're here as innovation leaders to accelerate the learning cycle, right? And I think this is so essential. And I hear this all the time. Teams that are starting on the journey around a big initiative or solving a big problem, they want to set the whole program up to go solve the problem, right? And my feedback has always been, first and foremost, you need to go through the ideation process, identify an initial idea to learn from, and then start the prototyping process to build something. And that's the fastest way to learn, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to build the program and then we're going to start building stuff out and then it'll all go well. The truth is it never goes well, right? Like I've not seen, sorry, I sound very aggressive on this, but I've not seen one project that just went so smoothly, that it just turned out the way we thought it was going to turn out from the very beginning, right? If we know that, then we know that the most important aspect of getting outcomes for innovation is accelerating the learning. And it sounds like an oxymoron or contradictory, because I'm saying, look, in order to be an effective innovation leader, it's not about you educating people, right? And I wholeheartedly hold to that. Here, what we're saying is the innovation process itself, if you're being effective, is about everyone learning in terms of how to get to the outcome faster. Not you educating, but you learning too on the journey and being open to learning. And so that's critical, is this prioritization to get to the top ideas so that you can accelerate the learning. And then this last piece, prototype, right, this is the 5th job to be done, 5th most critical job to be done as an innovation leader. And the key here is learning all the different ways to prototype. And I'll put it over here so you can see. Learning all the different ways to prototype is essential, right? It's not just about, we got to build an application, or, hey, we're going to, do a storyboard. It's actually learning which way to prototype based on where you are on the journey and where your stakeholders are, right? To me, this is the most effective, this is the most critical aspect of being an effective innovation leader. And it really encompasses all of these, is the journey, is realizing that at any point you can't be a robot, right? When we talk about prototyping, you can't just say, all right, we're going to prototype, we're going to build an application and build out a minimum lovable product, an MLP, and there you go, right? Because your stakeholders in one particular training may not be ready for that. Maybe where they are right now is they need to just kind of work through a sequence, right? Just to say, what does the flow look like? Let's just try to map it out. And so you have to have, when it comes to prototyping, you have to have that awareness. A lot of this, if we overlay, right? These are the jobs to be done, but if we overlay, what is the presence that you have to bring to the role? And it's really emotional intelligence to be able to understand where are your stakeholders, right? Where is, if you're, we work with teams where they do need to present to the board. You got to understand, where's the board, right? Where are they at on this journey? And so that's really, so my top 5 jobs to be done that you're going to have to master as an innovation leader. And we're on this journey with you this year, right? And I say this year, but over time, right? This is my goal, my mission, my passion as an innovation leader is to help other innovation leaders unlock the unlimited potential in themselves and the unlimited potential in their organization. I know that sounds kind of hokey, but for me, I've seen it working with leader after leader and just seeing as they open up to the potential of the next level, unlocking the next level of innovation leadership, just the whole, life and outlook end up changing because they see that they can actually drive innovation, create new things, get to outcomes. And so that gets me excited, That's my raison d'etre. I think that's the French word. Don't send me an email saying you pronounced it wrong, Clay. I'm practicing my French. So with that, this is Clay signing off. And just before I sign off, I just want to say, take a look at these. Let me know if you think there's another critical job to be done that I left off, right? Because we're going to go deep into these. We're going to work on an ebook around innovation leadership effectiveness. And so I'm starting to tie all of this together in terms of really helping our audience have the greatest impact in their organizations and lead innovation to get to those outcomes, okay? So with that, this is Clay Richardson signing off. Happy innovating and move at the fastest pace.